For our Gapminder project, we wanted to look at does money buy happiness? This project's done by me, Josh Slade, as well as Alex Stubblefield, and we compared income per person to the overall happiness score. So with our hypothesis, we believe that the higher the average income per person, the higher happiness score would be. The phrase money buys happiness has always been around and people look at it, but nobody knows if it's still truly that. So the results in this were very revealing of following our hypothesis, and it goes into our data trends, which show an upward trend between income and happiness score.
When looking at the data, we saw a significant positive correlation between the WHR score, or happiness score, and income. While this could signify that money can buy happiness, it's likely more connected to the idea that money buys a higher standard of living, access to healthcare, and other factors that increase happiness in the countries on the higher end of the spectrum, like the US, Sweden, Finland, and Denmark. As we'll see in a moment with the countries we chose to highlight, the factors that decreased or affected the happiness score were more related to the standard of living in the countries, particularly in India. One of the countries we chose to highlight in our comparison was India. India has shown a decrease in their WHR score, specifically around 2017. We wanted to explore what could have caused this drop in happiness score without a drop in income, and found 4 key events that impacted it. First were the South Asian floods of 2017, which displaced 31 million people and caused the destruction of roughly 800,000 homes, creating a refugee crisis in certain parts of the country. This put an overall strain on the country's resources, since farmland was also impacted, causing food shortages and other consequential issues. We also discovered that 31.6% of people in India suffered from food security from 2017 to 2019, some of which was a direct result of the South Asian floods that occurred in 2017. The Indian economy was also drastically overhauled their tax system in 2017, including a goods and service tax that was nationwide. Previously, the individual states and regions of India had their own independent tax and tariffs for interstate trading, many of which were higher than the newly proposed taxes on goods and services. Although the policy was generally well received, the rollout and implementation was poorly planned and caused a temporary drop in economic growth for a quarter, though it has since recovered. Lastly, the Indian government also canceled the value of old 500 rupee notes, which are about $750, and 1,000 rupee notes, which are roughly $15. These two types of notes accounted for 86% of the cash in circulation at the time, and a substantial amount of transactions still take place with cash in India. Unfortunately, the central bank in India didn't have enough of the new 500 and 2,000 rupee notes, meaning that people were lined outside of banks and ATMs around the clock just to get enough money for day-to-day transactions. These new notes were also smaller than the other ones, physically, so all of the country's 250,000 ATMs had to be retrofitted to accommodate these new bills. All of these items undoubtedly decreased the WHR score in India.
The second country that we compared India to is Kuwait. In 2008, Kuwait had an oil crisis and a suspension of trading in the Gulf Bank. Oil is a huge industry over in the Middle East, and the country produced 2.7 million barrels of oil per day in 2008. But the price per barrel dropped in 56% in just a couple months, and you can see the average income over the year drop, especially back in 2008, and it ended up rebounding or maintaining the same happiness score from the start to the end. In 2010, 7 Iranians went to trial for spying on Kuwait in the U.S. U.S. later considered selling anti-ballistic missiles to Kuwait, and that shows a sudden drop in the happiness score from 2010 to roughly 2016, where it eventually rebounded, although the income dropped.
In conclusion, money can buy happiness, but usually in the form of a higher standard of living or security. Countries at the top of our graph typically have a higher standard of living and stable economy and society, whereas countries on the lower end of our graph tend to have a lower standard of living or economic and social crises.